Hi, I'm Kristen Zook, and this is my case study over missing Booster Club funds. The summary is that Mr. Stevens is principal at George Washington Middle School, and this is in an area that has a great deal of community and parent support. Um, Recently, like in the past 10 years, the socioeconomic level of the families has started to decrease, but the parents are still really involved, which is really good for Mr. Stevens because being the only administrator, he really needs a lot of support from the volunteers. And one family specifically, the Bowmans, has three children. One of them is a daughter in his school that is a cheerleader, and she's made all-state cheerleading and wants PTA, or the family wants the PTA to pay for her to attend a holiday parade in New York because she has made the all-state cheerleading team. And he does not approve the payment from the PTA for her. And then later, a few days later, at a really busy basketball game, Mr. Stevens is really busy. Again, he's the only administrator, and he doesn't have a chance to monitor the handling of all of the money. And 10 tickets and $50 end up missing from what he believes should be in the bank bag that night. And the last person that he knows of that was handling the money is Mrs. Bowman. So this is kind of about what he should do at this point and what kinds of things need to be addressed. First, we start with what do I know from the case study. Community involvement at George Washington Middle School is very, very high. Parents are really involved. The population and the socioeconomic level of the families has been decreasing over the past 10 years. Mr. Stevens is the only administrator, and he relies really heavily on Booster Club and PTA parents to supervise and volunteer at the athletic events. And Mr. and Mrs. Bowman are one of the family's couples that often volunteer, and they have three teenage children. And they also really need to send their daughter to New York for their holiday parade as an all-state cheerleader. And Mrs. Bowman has met with the principal and wants the PTA to pay the $798 for the trip. And he does not approve because spending that money would be on just one student. And at the last home basketball game, it's very crowded. There's lots of people there supporting them. And Mr. Stevens is just a little too busy to monitor all that money handling, but he really feels like it'll be okay. He really trusts the parents and their involvement. And then one of the community members, Mr. Dumas, arrives at the game and mentions to the principal that he paid with a $50 bill to get in. What I still need to know, I have some questions after reading through that. One, are there sound guidelines and procedures in the handbook for staff to follow? Is there a handbook as far as handling funds and how those should be handled? Is there a bookkeeper on staff? Because there's no mention of a bookkeeper or of anyone handling the money other than the parents and then the principal. And then since parents do handle the money, have the parents been trained on these procedures? So we need to know if they're in place, and then if the parents are aware of how to handle them, because it kind of appears that there's not really a lot of checking going on. Do the parent organizations, such as the PTA and the Booster Club, do they have a board with things like a treasurer and things like that, that determines how the money is spent? And then do they have bylaws that govern the management of their money? Are any teachers or other staff members working at the athletic events? There are none mentioned, so I don't really know that that's the case, but that would be something I would need to know about. Did Mrs. Bowman count the money and the tickets alone? So she's the one who left the note about the missing tickets, and it appears she's the one who handled the money and gave it to the principal, but we need to know if she was there by herself. And are there family members working together to count the money at these different events? So at the concessions or at the gate. It talks a lot about parent involvement in specific families, but are we having families check each other's work or working together? And also, did Mr. Dumas actually pay with a $50 bill? He says that he did. We don't know for sure. There's no documentation of that. So if we're looking for a $50 bill, may or may not be there. The major problem, and there's a few of them, overarching problem is that we need to revisit just guidelines and procedures of handling money. But some other problems that arise from this, the principal is the only staff member supervising the events and handling the money. So while there are other people there need to be more staff members there, teachers, office staff, people that can help that are that work for the school, for the district. There's no evidence of procedures in place or training of parents. There seems to be no checks and balances for accountability before turning the money into the principal. It appeared that just one person counted it and gave it to him. The parent organizations don't seem to have established bylaws to govern money management because they thought that it would be an appropriate thing to come ask for the funds for one student, which means that maybe they don't typically have a procedure that they follow. The tickets and the gate money are they were mishandled in the situation, and $50 is now missing. The plan of action, what I would do as the leader, I would report the discrepancy using proper district protocol, whatever that is, whoever that needs to be reported to. I would then discuss the missing tickets and the money with Mrs. Bowman, get a statement from her, what happened, where the money is, why it was handled that way with the tickets, and then proceed as necessary. I would identify staff members who would be willing to work extra duty to help at the athletic events. I would ensure that each individual handling the money is trained on the proper school and the district procedures. I would include appropriate checks and balances for collecting and depositing funds at school events, and then communicate expectations and best practices for parent organizations so that as principal would only be involved in an advisory capacity like it's supposed to be, and led more by the parents. The strategies that I would use, first, report the discrepancy immediately using whatever those procedures would be. And then in discussing the tickets and the money with Mrs. Bowman, depending on how that went, would need to be able to take action as necessary. So however that goes, and then determine, does she just need more training because she really didn't understand the procedures? Did she in fact take the money? That needs to be reported to the authorities. Or does she need to be asked not to work with school funds for a while, or maybe all of the above? I would also request for staff members who would like to work extra duty to get involved in the athletic events and help manage those various responsibilities, because there needs to be more staff there to help out and work with the parents and the students and the community. I would also evaluate the current procedures, see if there's a handbook, if not, create one, and how are we training the people who are going to be working with our funds, and determine what changes maybe need to be made after evaluating what's in place. And make sure that included in that would be appropriate checks and balances at the point of collection. So always making sure that there be two people counting money, the tickets, any other inventory, and that both must sign off on the ending balance before turning that in at the end. So, and making sure also that those are not family members that would be working at those points together. Also, any individual that would be working with handling the money would need to be trained, and then they would need to sign off that they understand the procedures and their responsibility in doing that. And then also, I would meet with the parent organizations such as PTA and Booster Club, because based on this request that was made earlier, it appears that they, even as members of some of these organizations, that they don't really understand that the money should be spent in situations that would be for all students, not just one. So this indicates that there's an issue that although these are very active groups, that maybe they don't really understand what that money should be used for. And so just making sure that the decisions are not solely placed on the principal, but that there should be kind of a procedure for doing that through the board and through some bylaws. To promote the success of all students, some things that would be done that would help with the students, by getting more teachers and staff members involved at these events, students would be more supported outside of the classroom. So they would see their teachers in a different way and they would be there cheering them on. Also, funds that are intended to be used for all students should not be used for just one. And this allows more students to benefit from the resources that they could have with those funds. And having a handbook with clear procedures outlined helps prevent the loss of funds and or inventory, and that allows more money to be available to be used for the students in the school. Reflecting, as I was reading through this and thinking about the situation, some thoughts that I had, really more were questions, like what have PTA and Booster Club monies been used for in the past if they felt that sending a student on a trip was reasonable? Why is there only one administrator? And if it's funding, are there other leaders that could be put in place, maybe teacher leaders? Have the individuals handling the money been trained at all on these procedures? I was feeling surprised that there's no mention of staff members working at these events. Pretty sad that families are struggling financially in this area now, and that might be hard for them. And frustrated the principal does not seem to have the necessary support. It seemed like he's kind of frazzled. And then the values that still need to be in place. Leaders need to trust their staff and volunteers, but still monitor very closely. Parental involvement is very important, but at the appropriate time and place. And students need to be able to trust that all adults will handle funds ethically and in their best interest at all times. Unresolved issues. I've kind of mentioned some, but the school has minimal staff involvement. So it needs to be a discussion on why, and then also encouraging staff to participate and understand the value of participation. Principal needs more support on handling money, so maybe adding another bookkeeper or potentially an associate principal. Staff and volunteers need more training before they handle money. Parent organizations need to revisit their management of funds, and perhaps there are other ways that money could be raised to help the families that are in need, such as a care fund or a student support fund or something, so that parents who couldn't afford to send their kids could still be able to with a little support from the school rather than just relying on a booster club or a PTA. Ways that this supports and promotes effective and efficient management. Addressing the discrepancy as soon as it is discovered shows that these issues are not to be tolerated or ignored. Evaluating current procedures and then making whatever changes demonstrates the ability to analyze situations and adapt in response to areas of need. And providing opportunities for staff members to take leadership roles to help support the school demonstrates the ability to identify potential in staff and create a more efficiently run school. And to promote the social learning of every student, staff member involvement at the school makes students feel more supported and helps build relationships and connections that are really important to student success. And the continued support from staff, parents, and community members encourage students to participate in activities, and that's vital to social learning. And all community members working together towards common procedures for funding and just for the purpose of the funds creates a better learning environment. And promoting student academic learning. Using the funds from the parent organizations for all of the students supports them with additional resources that has the potential to reach higher levels of learning for students. And the more that the students see staff members at events outside of the classroom and feel supported, the more that they're going to engage in the different learning opportunities inside the classroom, and that will boost their academic performance. And another thing that staff and volunteers could do is not just volunteer for athletic events, but place more of a focus on student activities that have more of an academic side or a performance side, such as things like science olympiads, mathletics, theater. Because in this case, it looks like they're only supporting the athletics. So it'd be really great if they could reach out in some other areas, and that also would promote the success of students in academic areas.